She said, "I think we should take a break," just as her ex was about to return to town. The welding sparks erupted like a swarm of angry fireflies as I discovered my wife's suitcase flung open on the garage workbench. It was 3:00 a.m., and I was nursing a Budweiser, attempting to finish a repair job that should have been completed hours ago. The blue flame from my welding torch cast flickering shadows across the concrete walls. And that's when the light glinted off something that sent a chill down my spine, colder than an Ohio January. A nurse's costume, pristine white, adorned with a small red cross, lay nestled within the open luggage. Beside it rested a nun's habit, complete with its headpiece. Beneath both outfits, a 12-pack of Trojan condoms and a travel-sized bottle of Absolute vodka. I carefully set down my welding torch and gingerly picked up the nurse's outfit, feeling the cheap polyester between my calloused fingers. "Apparently, both the church and the hospital have very specific dress codes for business trips," I muttered to the empty garage. "My name is John Dorsey, JD to most people, and I've spent 15 years welding steel and fixing other people's broken things in this rust-belt town of Millfield. On a good day, the population hovers around 12,000. It dwindles to 11,000 when the smarter residents leave for college and never return. I married Megan Walsh when we were both 25, foolishly believing love would conquer all. Now, at 38, I'm staring at irrefutable evidence that my wife of 13 years has been indulging in some rather unusual and decidedly unmarital dress-up games. I grabbed my beer and took a long swig, the bitterness having nothing to do with the hops. The garage, usually a sanctuary of calming familiarity, reeked of metal shavings and motor oil. Tonight, those scents only served to remind me of my blue-collar existence, my life as a schmuck married to a woman who worked at Henderson Logistics downtown, a woman who spent her days discussing synergy and optimization while I got my hands dirty keeping the world turning. The suitcase itself was a high-end hard shell, a far cry from the battered duffel bag I'd been using since high school. Inside, amongst the costumes and contraceptives, I discovered lacy lingerie I'd never seen before, perfume far removed from her usual drugstore brand, and a silk nightgown that cost more than I earned in a single day. But it was the phone that truly captured my attention. Tucked into a side pocket was a cheap burner phone, the type you acquire at a gas station when you want to remain untraceable. I flipped it open and began scrolling through the text messages. Most were from someone listed in the contacts simply as Slick. One message read, "Can't wait for our weekend getaway, baby. Bring the nurse outfit. Hotel room is booked, room 237. I'll be waiting. Tell JD you're at another boring conference. He's too stupid to check." That last sentence struck me like a sledgehammer to the gut. Not because of the betrayal itself. I'd suspected something for months. The late nights, her newfound interest in professional development seminars, the sudden application of makeup even to take out the trash. No. What truly stung was the callous cruelty, the blatant assumption that I was a dim-witted welder, oblivious to my wife's escapades. I scrolled further back, discovering dozens more messages, spanning 3 months, detailed plans, arrangements, intimate details that churned my stomach. And then I saw the name I'd been dreading. Cliff Hudson. Slick. My former best friend, my best man, the man who helped me build this very garage, the man who'd spent years joining me for Sunday football and barbecues. The same Cliff who worked at Morrison's Auto Body across town, a man married to Linda Hudson for 8 years. I carefully set the phone down, as if it might explode. My hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. Right now, I felt that cold, calculating calm that precedes an irrevocable action. I walked over to my welding station and selected one of my finest needles, the type used for precise work on delicate joints. Then I returned to the suitcase and methodically poked tiny holes in each and every one of those 12 condoms. The holes were almost invisible, requiring a magnifying glass to detect, yet large enough to render them ineffective. "Congratulations," I said to the empty garage. "You're going to be parents." I meticulously replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, except for the phone, which I retained. I had a call to make. Cliff answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Hey there, Slick," I said, the nickname dripping like poison from my tongue. "It's your old buddy, JD. Sorry to wake you, but I've got some news that just couldn't wait." "JD, what the hell, man? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Is everything okay?" "Oh, everything's just peachy. In fact, it's about to get a whole lot more interesting. See, I just found out you and my wife are going to have something to celebrate real soon." A silence stretched, taut as a guitar string about to snap. "I don't know what you're talking about, man. You sound drunk. Maybe you should—" "Congratulations, Cliff. You're going to be a daddy. Tell my wife she's homeless now." I hung up and immediately began loading Megan's belongings into the bed of my pickup truck. The suitcase, her jewelry box, the fancy clothes purchased with money from our joint account, her collection of self-help books on maximizing one's potential, all of it went into my Ford F-150. The drive to Cliff's house took 12 minutes through the deserted streets of Millfield, past the shuttered steel mill, past the Dollar General and the late-night subway catering to third-shift workers, past the high school where Megan and I had met in chemistry class. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cliff lived in a modest ranch house on Elm Street, the type of home where working families raised their children and tended their lawns on Saturdays. His restored Mustang, cherished as if made of gold, sat in the driveway. I parked behind it, effectively blocking it in. I carefully carried the suitcase and 2 garbage bags overflowing with Megan's possessions up to the front porch and gently set them down. Then I rang the doorbell and waited. The porch light flickered on and I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, revealing Linda Hudson in a bathrobe, her sleep-mussed hair framing a face etched with confusion as she blinked at me. "JD, what are you doing here?" "It's the middle of the night." Linda was a kind woman, the type who brought casseroles to church potlucks and remembered everyone's birthdays. She didn't deserve what was about to transpire, but she deserved the truth. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said, gesturing toward the luggage. "But your husband's girlfriend left some things at my house. I thought she might want them back." Linda stared at the suitcase, then at me, then back at the suitcase. A series of expressions flickered across her face. Confusion, realization, and finally, a resigned sadness that spoke volumes. "She's not the first," Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else that night. Not the first. How long had this been going on? How many other wives had stood on their porches at 3 o'clock a.m. accepting the delivery of their husband's infidelity? "I'm sorry," I repeated, because what else could I say? Linda nodded slowly, then bent down to pick up the suitcase. "Thank you for bringing these by, JD. And I'm sorry, too." She softly closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch, my truck idling, my marriage officially dissolved. As I walked back to my Ford, I noticed a curtain twitching in the house across the street. Rosie Martinez, the neighborhood's unofficial news network, was already hard at work on what would undoubtedly become Elm Street's biggest story in years. I drove home through the empty streets, past the 24-hour diner where night shift workers grabbed coffee, past the police station where Officer Brady was likely dozing in his patrol car, past all the familiar landmarks of a life that had just been irrevocably shattered. When I arrived back at the house, I sat in my truck for a long moment, staring at the place Megan and I had purchased 7 years earlier. It was a modest 2-story colonial with vinyl siding and a porch desperately needing a fresh coat of paint. We'd once been proud of it, proud of the monthly mortgage payments, proud of the small garden Megan had planted in the backyard before her career consumed her interest in tomatoes and marigolds. Now, It merely resembled a house where strangers once resided. I went inside, poured myself a generous 3 fingers of bourbon, and sat at the kitchen table, awaiting my wife's return from wherever she'd spent the night. The microwave clock displayed 4:17 a.m. The house remained quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a train whistle from the freight line skirting the edge of town. At 5:30 a.m., I heard the familiar sound of Megan's Honda Civic pulling into the driveway. Megan entered through the front door as if she owned the place, which, technically, she still did. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the hardwood floor, the familiar sound of her setting down her purse and keys on the small table by the door, echoing the routine she'd followed for years. "Jay," she called out, "why are you up so early?" I remained seated at the kitchen table, cradling my bourbon. Just couldn't sleep. Funny thing about insomnia, gives you time to think, time to discover things. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still dressed in yesterday's business attire. Black slacks, white blouse, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked tired, yet something else lingered in her expression upon seeing me sitting there with a drink at dawn. Weariness, perhaps even fear. "You've been drinking," she stated, as if that were the true crux of the problem. "Just a nightcap? Or would that be a morning cap? Hard to tell when your wife's been out all night." I took a sip, letting the whiskey burn away some of the anger. "How was your conference, honey? Learn anything interesting about logistics?" Megan's face paled, but she quickly recovered. She'd always been quick-witted, a trait that had initially drawn me to her in high school. Now, it simply made her a more adept liar. It ran late. We went out for drinks afterward to discuss the presentations. "I should have called, but you were busy." "I get it. Important business. Speaking of which, you might want to check your suitcase. I think you forgot to pack a few things." The color completely drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "Well, for starters, you forgot to pack your husband's trust. Left that right here in the garage next to your nun costume and your boyfriend's love letters." Megan sank heavily into the chair opposite me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, marking the seconds of our marriage's demise. "How long?" I asked. "JD, I can explain." "How long, Megan?" She looked down at her hands, folded neatly on the table as if in prayer. 3 months with Cliff?" She nodded. "In our bed?" "No," she said quickly. "Never here. I wouldn't." "Oh, you have standards. How comforting." I finished my bourbon, setting the glass down harder than intended. Motel, then hotel rooms, the backseat of his Mustang like a couple of teenagers. It just happened, JD. We didn't plan it. We were both going through rough patches in our marriages. And I held up a hand. "Don't you dare make this about our marriage. Don't make this about rough patches or growing apart or any of that self-help book bull crap you've been reading. You made a choice. You chose to lie to me for 3 months. You chose to sneak around with my best friend. You chose to make me look like an idiot in front of the whole town." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. The woman sitting across from me resembled my wife, but she was a stranger. The Megan I'd married wouldn't have done this. Or perhaps she would have, and I'd simply been too blind to see it. "What do you want me to say?" she whispered. "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to pack whatever's left of your stuff and get out of my house. Our house, JD. Both our names are on the mortgage. Your stuff's already at Cliff's." Linda was real understanding about it. "Turns out you're not his first side piece. Congratulations, you're part of a pattern." Megan's head snapped up. "You told Linda?" Didn't have to tell her much. She figured it out pretty quick. Seems like she's had practice. The look of horror on Megan's face might have been satisfying if I'd possessed any remaining emotions, but I felt hollow, as if someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered. "You bastard," she said, venom lacing her voice. "You couldn't just talk to me about this. You had to humiliate me, ruin everything." "I ruined everything," I echoed, though without any genuine remorse. I laughed, a humorless sound. "That's rich, Meg. Really rich." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over, JD. You think you can just throw me out like garbage? I've got rights. I've got a lawyer. Good for you. Hope he's better in court than Cliff is in bed." She slapped me, hard enough to make my head snap to the side. My cheek stung, but I simply smiled at her. "Feel better? Go to hell. Already there, sweetheart. Already there." She stormed out, and a few minutes later, I heard her car start and speed away from the driveway. I poured myself another bourbon and watched the sun rise through the kitchen window. By 9 a.m., my phone was ringing incessantly. The first call was from my son, Kyle, who was away at college in Columbus. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mom just called me crying, saying you kicked her out of the house." Kyle was 19, a sophomore studying engineering, the one bright spot in my marriage. He possessed Megan's intelligence and my work ethic, and I was immensely proud of the man he was becoming. "Your mother and I are having some problems, son. She's staying somewhere else for a while." "Problems? Dad?" "She said you embarrassed her in front of the neighbors, that you're having some kind of breakdown." "I'm fine, Kyle. Your mother made some choices and now she's dealing with the consequences. That's all I'm going to say about it." There was a long pause. Kyle was intelligent enough to understand the unspoken implications. "She cheated on you. It wasn't a question. Like I said, she made some choices. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry. Not your fault, son. Not your problem either. You focus on school. This will all work itself out." After hanging up with Kyle, the phone continued ringing. First my brother Mike in Cleveland, then my sister Sarah in Pittsburgh. The news was spreading rapidly through the family network. Then came the calls from work. I had 3 jobs scheduled for the week, and clients wanted assurances that I was still capable of working. By noon, I was utterly exhausted from the endless explanations. I unplugged the landline and switched off my cell phone. That's when Rosie Martinez knocked on my door. Rosie lived across the street and had self-appointed herself the neighborhood's official information clearinghouse. She was 65, retired from the phone company, and possessed the instincts of a seasoned investigative journalist. She also made the best tamales in Millfield and had been kind to Megan and me over the years. "Jay, honey," she said when I opened the door, "I brought you some lunch. Figured you might not be thinking about eating right now." She handed me a covered plate that smelled divine. Beef stew, judging by the aroma. "Thanks, Rosie. That's real kind of you. Can I come in for a minute? I think we should talk." I led her into the living room where she settled into Megan's favorite chair as if she belonged there. "I saw what happened last night," she said without preamble. "Saw you drop off those suitcases at the Hudson place. Saw Linda take them inside. I figured you might have..." "Cliff Hudson's a piece of crap, JD. Always has been. I've seen him sneaking around for years. Different women, different cars. Linda's a saint for putting up with it as long as she has. Why didn't anyone ever say anything?" Rosie shrugged. "Not my business. But when he started sniffing around your wife, that made it my business. I like you, JD. You're good people. You knew about Megan and Cliff. Suspected. Saw them together at that motel out on Route 9 about a month ago. I was coming back from visiting my sister in Youngstown. Stopped for gas, saw Megan's car in the lot, saw Cliff coming out of one of the rooms. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just a nosy old woman stirring up trouble? She had a point. A month ago, I would have vehemently defended Megan against any accusation. I would have been furious at Rosie for even suggesting such a thing. Besides, Rosie continued, some things a man has to figure out for himself. But now that it's out in the open, you need to know what you're up against. What do you mean? Megan's not going to just slink away quietly. She's got pride and she's got friends. Brenda Miles, for one, they've been thick as thieves ever since Megan started working at Henderson Logistics. I knew Brenda. She worked in HR at the same company, a sharp-tongued woman in her 40s who'd never married and seemed to derive pleasure from other people's misfortune. She and Megan had become close friends over the past couple of years, bonding over their shared disdain for small-town life. What about Brenda? She's been filling Megan's head with ideas. Women's liberation, financial independence, all that. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but Brenda's got a mean streak. She's the one who probably encouraged Megan to step out in the first place. Great. So my wife had a support network of embittered women who viewed my pain as entertainment. There's something else, Rosie said. I heard through the grapevine that Megan's been talking to a lawyer, Dave Brennan, the one who handles divorces for all the rich folks in town. She moves fast. She's scared, JD. Scared and angry. That's a dangerous combination in a woman like Megan. After Rosie left, I sat in my empty house, attempting to formulate a plan. I'd acted purely on instinct the previous night, but now I needed a strategy. Megan wasn't going to make this easy, and apparently she had allies. I walked out to the garage and surveyed my welding equipment, my tools, the half-finished projects that represented my livelihood. I'd built this business from nothing, working 16-hour days and saving every penny to acquire better equipment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or was it? If Megan had already consulted a lawyer, how long before they came after the business, the house, everything I'd worked for? I picked up my cell phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was seeking. Coach, it's J.D. Dorsey. I need to talk to you. Dan Coach Braddock had been training fighters at Murphy's boxing gym for 30 years, witnessing every imaginable human drama unfold both inside and outside the ring. He was 62, built like a fire hydrant, possessing the street smarts honed from a tough Detroit upbringing before relocating to Ohio to escape his own past mistakes. I found him at the Anvil, the dive bar he'd purchased 5 years earlier when the previous owner drank himself to death. It was the kind of place where working men came to forget their troubles, and nobody asked too many questions about why you needed forgetting. JD, the coach said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. Heard you had some excitement last night. Word travels fast. Small town, big mouths. Rosie Martinez was in here an hour ago buying a six-pack and spreading the news like it was gospel. I took a long drink of the beer. It was cold and bitter. Exactly what I needed. What do you know about divorce lawyers, Coach? Enough to know they're like vultures. They circle around wounded marriages and pick the bones clean. He leaned against the bar, studying my face. Megan lawyered up already. That's what I hear. Dave Brennan. Yeah. The coach whistled low. Expensive taste. Brennan doesn't get out of bed for less than $5,000 up front. Where's she getting that kind of money? Good question. You want some advice, JD? That's why I'm here. You don't win this kind of fight with lawyers. Lawyers are like referees. They don't care who wins. They just want to get paid. You win with information. You win with leverage. You win by knowing things the other side doesn't want you to know. What kind of things? The kind of things that make people reconsider their positions. The kind of things that make expensive lawyers suddenly seem like a bad investment. I understood his implication, but I wasn't sure I was prepared to travel down that road. I'm not looking to destroy anybody, Coach. I just want out of this marriage with my dignity and my business intact. Noble sentiment, but nobility is a luxury you can't afford when you're fighting for your life. And make no mistake, JD, that's what this is. Megan and her friends are going to try to destroy you. They're going to paint you as an abusive husband, a drunk, maybe even unstable. They're going to take everything you've worked for and leave you with nothing but debt and bad memories. You sound like you've been through this before. 3 times. Cost me 2 businesses and most of my hair. He ran a hand over his bald scalp. That's why I know what I'm talking about. I finished my beer and ordered another. The afternoon crowd was beginning to arrive. Men from the remaining factories, construction workers, a few retirees with nothing better to do than drink and lament the state of the world. So, what do you suggest? Information gathering. Find out what Megan's really up to, who's helping her, what they're planning. Knowledge is power, JD. The more you know, the better you can protect yourself. You mean like spying on her? I mean like being aware of your surroundings. Like paying attention to what's happening in your own life instead of walking around with your head in the clouds. That stung, but he wasn't wrong. I'd been completely oblivious to the unfolding events within my own marriage. How many signs had I missed? How many lies had I swallowed without question? There's something else, the coach said. You need to document everything. Every conversation, every threat, every attempt to manipulate me. It was all becoming clear. Divorce court, coach had said, was like a boxing match. It wasn't always the best fighter who won, but the one who could prove they'd been hit the hardest. I spent the rest of the afternoon absorbing his war stories, struggling to grasp the horrifying reality that my life had transformed into a brutal battlefield. By the time I left, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't noble, but it was practical. The first step was surveillance. I drove to Henderson Logistics, a low-slung brick building in the industrial park. Megan's Honda was in the parking lot, parked next to Brenda Miles's bright red Camaro. I parked across the street, behind a billboard advertising the local Ford dealership, and settled in to wait. At 6:30, the two women emerged from the building, chatting animatedly. They got into Brenda's car and drove away. I followed discreetly, maintaining a safe distance, several cars between us. They didn't go far. The Camaro pulled into the parking lot of the Sleepy Inn, the same dilapidated motel where Rosie had spotted Megan and Cliff. My stomach tightened as I watched them park and head toward one of the rooms. Instead of entering a room, they sat down at a picnic table near the motel office. I parked behind a dumpster, rolled down my windows, and strained to hear their conversation. "Can't believe he humiliated me like that," Megan said, her voice laced with anger. "Dropping my things off at Linda's house in the middle of the night like I'm some kind of criminal." "He's trying to intimidate you," Brenda replied. "Classic abuser behavior. Make you feel small and powerless so you'll crawl back to him." Abuser? I'd never laid a hand on Megan in anger. I'd never even raised my voice to her until this morning. But I understood how the narrative was being spun. "Dave Brennan says we can use that," Megan continued. "Emotional abuse, public humiliation, it all adds up to a pattern of controlling behavior. What about the business? Can we go after that?" "Dave thinks so," Brenda responded. "Half of everything acquired during the marriage, including the value of his welding equipment and customer base, could be worth $50,000, $60,000. My blood ran cold. $60,000 was probably more than the business was actually worth, but fighting over it would deplete my savings in legal fees. "And the house?" Megan asked. "That's trickier. It's in both our names, but I've been contributing to the mortgage payments." "Dave says we can argue that your income made the house possible," Brenda said. "What about Cliff?" Megan asked. "How does he figure into all this?" Megan fell silent for a moment. "That's complicated," she finally said. "Dave says the adultery doesn't matter much in a no-fault state, but it could hurt me if JD's lawyer plays it right. Maybe it's time to cut Cliff loose. He served his purpose." "What do you mean?" Brenda asked. "I mean, you needed something to push you over the edge, to make you realize how unhappy you were, Cliff," Megan explained. "Was that something? But now that you're free, do you really want to tie yourself to another small-town loser?" I couldn't see Megan's face, but her body language suggested she was considering Brenda's words. "Seriously, I don't know," she said finally. It's all happening so fast. That's exactly why you need to think clearly, Brenda insisted. This is your chance to start over, to build the life you really want. Don't waste it on Cliff Hudson. They talked for another 20 minutes, meticulously outlining their legal strategy and how to maximize Megan's settlement. By the time they left, I knew the extent of what I was facing. This wasn't just about a failed marriage, it was a calculated, coordinated effort to financially and emotionally ruin me. Brenda wasn't just offering moral support, she was actively plotting against me. I drove home and spent the evening meticulously documenting everything I'd overheard. Coach was right about documentation. If this was going to be a war, I needed detailed records of every engagement. The next morning brought a new development. I was in the garage, trying to focus on work, when a car pulled into my driveway. It was a silver BMW, expensive and jarringly out of place in my blue-collar neighborhood. Dave Brennan emerged, exuding an air of entitlement, as if he owned the place. He was in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with the assured swagger that comes from never having to worry about money. I'd seen him around town, usually at the country club or the expensive restaurants where people like me couldn't afford to eat. Mr. Dorsey, I'm Dave Brennan, and I represent your wife in the dissolution of your marriage. Dissolution? That's a fancy word for divorce. Indeed it is, Brennan confirmed, handing me a manila envelope. These are the initial papers. You'll want to get yourself an attorney. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Mostly legal jargon, but the basic message was brutally clear. Megan wanted half of everything. Half the house, half the business, alimony, and my legal fees. Your wife is being very reasonable, Brennan continued, his smile thinly veiled. She's not seeking to punish you, just to ensure a fair division of marital assets. Fair? I scoffed. Right. I understand you're upset, Brennan said smoothly. Divorce is never easy, but if you cooperate with this process, we can keep things civil and relatively inexpensive. And if I don't cooperate? I asked, my voice hardening. Brennan's smile sharpened, devoid of warmth. Then things get complicated and expensive for everyone involved. After he left, I called every divorce attorney in town. The first 3 were either prohibitively expensive or too busy to take my case. The fourth one, a guy named Tom Walsh, who worked out of a strip mall office, agreed to meet me that afternoon. Tom was around my age, with weary eyes and a rumpled suit that had seen better days. His office smelled faintly of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Dave Brennan, he said after I explained the situation. Yeah, I know Dave. He's good at what he does, which is taking working guys like you and bleeding them dry. Can you beat him? I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. Depends, Tom replied. How much money do you have? Not much, I admitted. Maybe $10,000 in savings. That'll get you started, Tom said, his voice flat. But if this thing goes to trial, you're looking at $20,000, $30,000 minimum, maybe more. I don't have that kind of money, I said, a knot of despair tightening in my chest. Then we need to settle fast, or we need to find some leverage, Tom stated. What kind of leverage? I asked, my hope dwindling. Tom leaned back, his gaze assessing. The kind that makes the other side want to settle quickly and quietly, he explained. The kind that makes expensive lawyers suddenly seem like a bad investment. He was echoing Coach's advice, but coming from a lawyer, it sounded far more ominous. I'm not looking to hurt anybody, I said, my voice barely a whisper. That's admirable, Tom conceded, but they're looking to hurt you. Sometimes you have to choose between being noble and being smart. I left Tom's office with more questions than answers and a retainer agreement that would cost me $3,000 up front, money I didn't have for a fight I didn't want, against people who used to be my family and friends. That evening, I was back at the anvil, nursing a beer and trying to formulate my next move. The bar was crowded with the usual suspects: factory workers, construction guys, a few off-duty cops, the kind of people who understood the value of honest labor. "JD," a voice called from across the room. "Come over here, buddy." It was Tommy Morrison, a guy I'd known since high school. He worked at the auto parts store and had always been friendly, though we'd never been close. I walked over to his table where he was sitting with 3 other guys I recognized from around town. "Sit down, have a drink," Tommy said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We were just talking about you." "Yeah, about what a lucky son of a gun you are," Pete Kowalski, a construction worker, chimed in. "Getting rid of that stuck-up wife of yours. She always thought she was too good for this town," Mike Chen, who ran the hardware store, added. "Too good for the rest of us." "Cliff Hudson, too," the 4th guy, whose name I couldn't recall, said. "Guy's been screwing around on Linda for years. About time somebody called him on it." I sat down, accepting the beer Tommy offered. These guys were trying to be supportive, but their words felt hollow. They didn't understand that I wasn't celebrating. I was mourning. "You know what you should do?" Pete said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "You should make them pay. Take them for everything they've got." "It doesn't work that way," I said, shaking my head. "She's the one with the lawyer." "So get a better lawyer," Mike suggested. "Sue her for alienation of affection or some crap." "This isn't a movie, guys," I explained. "Real life doesn't work like that." "Maybe not," Tommy said. "But that doesn't mean you have to roll over and play dead. You've got friends in this town, JD. People who respect you. That's got to count for something." As the evening wore on, more people stopped by the table offering their support and unsolicited advice, most well-meaning but ranging from impractical to illegal. By closing time, I was drunk, angry, and no closer to a solution than I'd been that morning. I stumbled out of the anvil into the cool night air and nearly collided with someone walking up the sidewalk. "Easy there, JD," a familiar voice said. It was Cliff Hudson. Seeing him standing there under the streetlight felt like a physical blow to the gut. He looked the same as always. Average height, thinning brown hair, the kind of guy who'd been good-looking in high school but was slowly letting himself go. We'd been friends for 20 years, stood up at each other's weddings, shared countless beers and Sunday afternoon football games. Now he was the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. "JD," he said, holding up his hands as if approaching a dangerous animal. "I know you're pissed, and you have every right to be, but can we talk, man to man?" "Man to man," I laughed, a humorless sound. "That's rich, Cliff. Real rich." "Look, I know what this looks like," Cliff pleaded. "What this looks like," I repeated, my voice thick with scorn. "It looks like my best friend has been screwing my wife behind my back for 3 months. It looks like you've been sitting at my dinner table drinking my beer and lying to my face while you planned your next motel room adventure." "It wasn't supposed to happen, JD," Cliff stammered. It just did. Megan was unhappy, and Linda and I have been having problems for years." "So you decided to solve both your problems by destroying 2 marriages?" I sneered. "Brilliant plan, Cliff. Really shows that strategic thinking that made you such a success in life." Cliff's face flushed crimson. "You don't have to be an a-hole about it," he mumbled. "I don't have to be a dick," I retorted. "You screw my wife and I'm the a-hole?" "Keep your voice down," Cliff said, glancing around nervously. "People are watching." "Let them watch," I said, my voice rising. "Let the whole goddamn town watch. Maybe they should know what kind of man Cliff Hudson really is." "You're drunk, JD," Cliff said. "Go home and sleep it off." "We can talk about this when you're sober." "I'm drunk, but I'm not stupid," I countered. "And I'm not going anywhere until you explain to me how you justify what you did." Cliff sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I don't know what you want me to say," he said. "I'm sorry." "Fine, I'm sorry," I mimicked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. 20 years of friendship, and you're sorry. "What do you want from me, JD?" Cliff asked, his voice strained. "You want me to beg? You want me to get down on my knees and grovel?" "I want you to tell me why," I demanded. "Why her? Why now? Why behind my back instead of just telling me you wanted out of our friendship?" "Because I knew you'd react like this," Cliff admitted. "I knew you'd go crazy and make everything worse." "Make everything worse," I scoffed. "Cliff, you were planning to run away with my wife." "How exactly could I have made that worse?" "We weren't planning to run away together," Cliff protested. It was just something that happened. A mistake. A 3-month mistake with hotel rooms, costumes, and plans for weekend getaways," I corrected, my voice heavy with bitterness. He stared at me, weighing how much to confess. "Megan told you about the costumes," he said. "Megan didn't tell me crap," I said. "I found them myself, along with your love notes and your cheap burner phone." "You went through her things," Cliff accused. "They were in my garage, in my house, which, by the way, you're not welcome in anymore," I said, my voice cold and hard. "JD, listen to me," Cliff pleaded. "Whatever you think was happening between Megan and me, it's over. She ended it yesterday. Said she needed to focus on her marriage." I stared at him in disbelief. "Her marriage?" I repeated, incredulous. "Cliff? I threw her out of the house." "I had our divorce papers served this morning. What marriage?" Now it was his turn to look confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Megan said you guys were going to work things out. She said you just needed some time to cool down." "When did she tell you this?" I asked, a chilling realization dawning. "This morning," Cliff replied. "She came by the shop, said she was staying with Brenda for a few days while you got your head together." "And you believed her?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. "Why wouldn't I?" Cliff asked, genuinely confused. "Look, JD, I know this is screwed up, but Megan loves you. She made a mistake, but she wants to fix it." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Cliff, your girlfriend hired Dave Brennan to take me for everything I own," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She's not trying to fix our marriage. She's trying to destroy me." The color drained from his face. "That's not... She wouldn't..." he stammered. "She would, and she did," I said, my voice steely. "And if you think she's going to ride off into the sunset with you after she's done screwing me over, you're even dumber than I thought." I left him standing there on the sidewalk and walked to my truck. As I drove home, I thought about what he'd said. Megan had lied to him too. She'd told him she was trying to save our marriage while simultaneously plotting to destroy me in court. It was almost impressive, in a chillingly sociopathic way. The next morning brought a new development. I was in the garage focusing on a welding job when my phone rang. It was Jim Henderson, the owner of Henderson Logistics and Megan's boss. "JD, Jim Henderson. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to talk to you about a situation that's developed here at the office." "What kind of situation?" I asked, a sense of foreboding settling over me. "Well, it's about Megan and some concerns that have been raised about her behavior," Jim replied cautiously. I set down my torch and gave him my full attention. "What kind of concerns?" I pressed. "I'd rather not discuss this over the phone," Jim said. "Could you come by the office this afternoon, say around 3? "I'll be there," I replied. Henderson Logistics occupied a modest building in the industrial park, the kind of place where small businesses tried to appear larger than they actually were. Jim Henderson, a decent man in his 50s, had built the company from nothing and treated his employees fairly. His office was functional, not fancy. A metal desk, filing cabinets, and a few certificates on the wall. He gestured for me to sit down and close the door behind me. "JD, I'm going to be straight with you," Jim began. "We've had some problems with Megan's work performance over the past few months. Missed deadlines, sloppy reports, unexplained absences." "I see," I replied, my mind racing. "But that's not why I called you," Jim continued. "Yesterday, Megan came to me with some very serious allegations about you. She claimed you were stalking her, harassing her at work, making threatening phone calls." My stomach dropped. "That's not true, Jim," I said, my voice firm. "I haven't contacted her at all, except through our lawyers." "I didn't think it sounded like you, but I had to take it seriously," Jim said. "I told her to file a police report if she felt threatened." "Did she?" I asked, my heart pounding. "No," Jim replied, and that got me thinking. So I did a little checking, and I found some things that concern me. He opened a file folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "These are Megan's phone records for the past month," Jim explained. "Company phone, so I have a right to review them. Take a look at the highlighted entries." I scanned the pages, dozens of calls to unfamiliar numbers, many during business hours. "The number highlighted in yellow, that's Dave Brennan's office," Jim pointed out. "Megan called him 17 times in the past 2 weeks, mostly during work hours." "The number in blue, that's a private investigator in Youngstown," Jim continued. "A guy named Rick Santos, specializes in divorce cases, surveillance, asset searches, that kind of thing." "What would she need a private investigator for?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That's what I wondered," Jim said. "So I called him, told him I was conducting a background check on a potential employee named Megan Dorsey. Asked if he'd ever heard of her, and he said he couldn't discuss specific cases, but he confirmed that someone matching her description had hired him to conduct surveillance on her husband. Paid him $2,000 cash." I felt as if I'd been hit by a truck. "She's having me followed," I said, my voice numb with shock. "Looks that way," Jim agreed. "The question is why? What's she hoping to find?" "I have no idea," I said. "I go to work, I go home, I go to the Anvil for a few beers. That's about it." "That's what I figured," Jim said. "But here's the thing, JD. Megan's been using company resources to wage her divorce war. Company phone, company computer, company time. That's grounds for termination." "You're going to fire her?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I'm going to have to," Jim confirmed. "But I wanted to talk to you first as a courtesy. This is going to get ugly, and I didn't want you to be blindsided." I thanked Jim and left his office, my head spinning. Megan wasn't just trying to destroy me in court. She was actively investigating me, searching for anything she could use against me. But what could she possibly hope to find? That evening, I was back at the Anvil trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. Coach was behind the bar, wiping down glasses and listening to the usual complaints from the usual suspects. "You look like crap," he said when I sat down. "I feel worse than I look," I admitted, my voice heavy with despair. I told him about my conversation with Jim Henderson and the private investigator. Coach listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "She's building a case," he said finally, "trying to paint you as unstable, dangerous. The harassment allegations, the surveillance, it's all designed to make you look like the bad guy." "But I haven't done anything," I protested. "Doesn't matter," Coach said grimly. "Perception is reality in divorce court. If she can convince a judge that you're a threat, she gets a restraining order. Once you've got a restraining order on your record, everything else becomes easier for her." "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You fight back," Coach said, "but you do it smart." "What does that mean?" I asked, confused and desperate for guidance. Coach poured himself a shot of bourbon and knocked it back. "It means you stop playing defense and start playing offense," he said. It means you find out what Megan and her friends are really up to, and you use that information to protect yourself. I'm not sure I'm cut out for that kind of thing, Coach, I confessed, my voice filled with doubt. Then you better learn fast, Coach said, his voice hardening, because they're not going to show you any mercy. As if summoned by our conversation, the door to the anvil opened and Brenda Miles walked in. She scanned the room until her eyes found me, then walked over to the bar with the assured confidence of someone who felt completely at home. "And JD," she said, sliding onto the stool next to me. "We need to talk." "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Brenda," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, but we do," Brenda countered, her voice smooth but firm. "See, Megan's my friend, and I don't like seeing my friends get hurt." "Your friend hurt herself when she decided to cheat on her husband," I retorted. "Your friend hurt herself when she married a small-minded loser who can't handle a strong, independent woman." Coach stepped forward, his large frame casting a shadow over us both. "Lady, I think you should finish your drink and move along," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Brenda said, refusing to back down. "I'm here to offer JD some friendly advice." "I'm listening," I said, bracing myself. "Drop the divorce contest," Brenda said directly. "Let Megan have what she's asking for, and this all goes away quietly. Keep fighting, and things are going to get very unpleasant for you." "Is that a threat?" I asked, trying to gauge her sincerity. "It's a reality check," Brenda said. "Megan has resources you don't have. She has friends, connections, legal representation. You have what? A welding torch and a drinking problem." "I don't have a drinking problem," I denied, though I knew it wasn't entirely true. "No?" Brenda challenged. "How many nights this week have you been in here drowning your sorrows? How many people have seen you stumbling drunk through town, ranting about your cheating wife?" She had a point. I had been drinking more than usual, and I had been venting my frustrations to anyone who would listen. "Here's what's going to happen," Brenda continued. "Megan's going to get half the house, half your business, and alimony. You're going to pay her legal fees, and you're going to keep your mouth shut about Cliff Hudson. In return, she won't pursue harassment charges, and she won't tell the court about your alcohol abuse." "Alcohol abuse?" I questioned, my voice sharp. "We have witnesses, JD. People who've seen you drunk and belligerent. People who will testify that you're unstable and potentially dangerous." I glanced around the bar, realizing several people were watching our conversation with keen interest. How many of them would be willing to testify against me if the price was right? "You're bluffing," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Brenda asked, a glint in her eye. "You want to find out? Because I promise you, JD, this is the best deal you're going to get. Turn it down, and we'll bury you so deep you'll never dig your way out." She finished her drink, stood up, and left. "Well," Coach said after several minutes of silence, "now you know what you're really up against." "Yeah," I replied, my voice flat. "I'm screwed." "Maybe," Coach said. "Or maybe it's time to stop playing by their rules and start playing by yours." "What do you mean?" I asked, intrigued. "I mean, it's time to find out what they're really hiding," Coach said. "Because people who make threats like that, they've got secrets of their own." The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe it was Coach's words, maybe it was Brenda's threats, or maybe I'd simply reached the point where I had nothing left to lose. Either way, I knew what I had to do. My son Kyle had taught me enough about computers to be dangerous, and Megan had never been very good with passwords. She used the same one for everything, the name of our first dog followed by her birth year. It took me 15 minutes to hack into her email account from the computer at the public library. What I found there was far worse than I could have ever imagined. The emails between Megan and Brenda went back 6 months, long before the affair with Cliff had even begun. And they weren't just friends, they were co-conspirators. Brenda systematically poisoned Megan against me, subtly manipulating her perception of our marriage, painting it as a prison and me as her warden. However, that was only the beginning of her machinations. I uncovered emails between Brenda and Rick Santos, the private investigator she'd hired. Her instructions to Santos weren't simply to gather evidence of my wrongdoing. She'd paid him to fabricate evidence, doctored photographs, concocted witness statements, and invented incidents that never occurred. Further investigation revealed an exchange of emails between Brenda and Dave Brennan outlining their strategic plan. Their aim was to portray me as a physically abusive husband, someone who threatened Megan and Cliff, and an alcoholic unfit to have custody of our son. All of it was a blatant fabrication, yet these lies posed a significant challenge to disprove in a court of law. The final damning piece of evidence was an email from Megan to her sister in California, sent just 3 days prior. It read, "The plan is working perfectly. JD doesn't suspect anything. Brenda says we can probably get $60,000 out of the business plus half the house value. I'll be able to start over somewhere new, maybe move out there with you. Cliff thinks we're going to be together, but he's just been a useful idiot. Once this is over, I never want to see him again." I printed all the emails and immediately drove to Tom Walsh's office. He reviewed the emails, his astonishment growing with each one. "This is incredible, JD," he exclaimed. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, probably a dozen other felonies. Can we use it?" "Hell yes, we can use it," he confirmed. "But we need to be smart about how we do it. If we tip our hand too early, they'll claim the emails were fabricated." "So, what do you suggest?" I asked. "We set a trap," Tom responded. "Let them commit to their lies in court under oath. Then we spring this on them." "When?" I pressed. "There's a hearing scheduled for next week," he replied. "Temporary support and custody arrangements. They'll probably try to get a restraining order against you at the same time. And if they succeed, they won't. Not after the judge sees this." I left Tom's office feeling a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. But my work wasn't finished. There was one more crucial step I needed to take. That evening, I drove to the warehouse district on the outskirts of town. It was a collection of aging industrial buildings, mostly vacant since the factories had closed down. Cliff used one of these buildings to store cars he was working on, a side hustle supplementing his auto body shop income. I found him there, meticulously restoring a vintage Camaro under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. He looked up as he heard my approach, and I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "JD, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice laced with apprehension. "We need to talk, Cliff," I replied. "Really talk this time." "If you're here to beat the crap out of me, just get it over with," he retorted defensively. "I'm not here to hurt you," I assured him. "I'm here to help you." He put down his wrench and wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Help me with what?" he inquired, still wary. "With understanding what Megan and Brenda have really been doing," I said, producing copies of the emails. He read them slowly, his facial expression shifting from initial confusion to disbelief, finally settling on anger. "She called me a useful idiot," he muttered, incredulous. "That's the least of it," I replied, urging him to continue reading. Once he finished, shame clouded his features. "JD, I had no idea. I thought she cared about me. She cared about using you to destroy my marriage so she could take half of everything I own," I corrected him. "But why?" "I mean, why go through all this? Why not just ask for a divorce?" he questioned, bewildered by the elaborate scheme. "Because a simple divorce doesn't pay as well," I explained. "She needed to make me look like the bad guy so she could justify taking more." Cliff slumped onto a work stool, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his realization. "I've been such a fool," he admitted. We both have, but it's not too late to make this right. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued by his sudden shift in demeanor. I mean, you can testify about what really happened, he proposed. Tell the court that Megan pursued you, not the other way around. Tell them about the lies she told you. And what do I get out of it? I asked, wanting clarity on his offer. You get to keep your marriage, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Because Linda doesn't know about the other women, does she? The ones Brenda mentioned in her emails. Cliff's face paled. You wouldn't, he stammered, fear evident in his eyes. I don't want to, I said. But if you don't help me stop this, I'll have no choice. Megan and Brenda are planning to destroy both of us. Cliff, the only way to stop them is to work together, I emphasized, stating the stark reality of the situation. He stared at the concrete floor for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early, dressed in my only suit, carrying a briefcase filled with the incriminating evidence. Tom Walsh was already there, exuding a confidence I hadn't seen from him before. Megan arrived with Dave Brennan and Brenda Miles. She presented a picture of composure and professionalism, the very image of a wronged woman seeking justice. Brenda, sitting in the gallery, offered a silent yet powerful display of moral support. The hearing commenced with Brennan presenting Megan's case. She took the stand and, under oath, meticulously painted a picture of me as an abusive alcoholic husband who had threatened her and her friends. She claimed I'd been stalking and harassing her at work, and that I'd caused her to fear for her safety. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. Then it was Tom's turn. Your Honor, he began, we have evidence that Mrs. Dorsey's testimony is not only false, but part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud my client. Brennan immediately objected, but the judge overruled him, allowing Tom to proceed. He presented the emails one by one, methodically demonstrating to the court how the entire case against me had been meticulously fabricated. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge carefully reviewed the evidence. Megan's expression shifted dramatically from confident assurance to confusion, then finally to sheer terror as the gravity of her situation sunk in. Mrs. Dorsey, the judge addressed her directly, do you have any explanation for these communications? Megan glanced at Brennan, but he was engrossed in his notes, likely calculating how quickly he could extricate himself from this rapidly unraveling case. Those emails were taken out of context, she stammered, her voice barely audible. Out of context? The judge raised one of the printouts. You wrote, and I quote, "The plan is working perfectly. JD doesn't suspect anything." What plan were you referring to? I don't remember writing that, she mumbled, her composure crumbling completely. Are you claiming these emails are fabricated? The judge pressed. I don't know. Maybe, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. That's when Tom played his trump card. He called Cliff Hudson to the stand. Cliff's testimony detailed Megan's pursuit of him, her confession that she planned to leave me regardless, and how she used their affair to justify taking half of everything I owned. His testimony corroborated every detail outlined in the emails. By the time Cliff finished, Megan was openly weeping, and Brenda had discreetly slipped out of the courtroom. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Mrs. Dorsey, he announced, I find your testimony to be not only false, but perjurious. Mr. Brennan, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for possible criminal prosecution. As for the divorce proceedings, I'm awarding Mr. Dorsey full custody of all marital assets, plus attorney's fees. It was over. Just like that. Outside the courthouse, Megan attempted to approach me, but I walked past her without acknowledging her presence. She'd made her choices, and now she would have to face the consequences. Cliff was waiting by my truck, JD, I want you to know how sorry I am about everything, he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. I know you are, Cliff, I replied, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Is there any chance we can we ever be friends again? He asked hesitantly. I looked at him for a long moment. He was a weak man, easily manipulated by a stronger woman, but he was also the man who'd betrayed a 20-year friendship for a few months of intimacy. No, I said finally. We can't. 6 months later, I was in my garage, working on a custom welding job for a client in Cleveland. Business was booming, better than it had ever been. Word of the divorce case had spread, somehow translating into an increase in work. Perhaps people respected the fact that I'd fought back and won. Megan had left town shortly after the hearing, relocating to California to live with her sister. Brenda Miles was fired from Henderson Logistics and faced criminal charges for fraud. Dave Brennan was under investigation by the state bar. Cliff and Linda were attempting to reconcile, although I'd heard it wasn't going smoothly. Some things, once broken, remain irreparably damaged. My son Kyle had transferred to a school closer to home, helping me with the business. He was growing into a fine young man, and I was immensely proud of him. As for me, I was slowly learning to navigate life alone again. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't unbearable either. I had my work, my friends at the anvil, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, with intelligence, patience, and a willingness to fight for what's right, the good guys actually do prevail. I was finishing the welding job when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the garage window, I saw a familiar figure emerging from a Honda Civic. Megan. She looked different, thinner, older, as if the past 6 months had aged her by 5 years. She walked slowly toward the garage, her shoulders slumped against the October wind. "Hello, JD," she said softly. "Megan," I replied. "Can we talk?" "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said. "Please, just 5 minutes," she pleaded. Against my better judgment, I set down my torch and turned my attention to her. "I came to apologize," she began, her voice choked with emotion. "For everything. For the affair, for the lies, for trying to destroy you in court." "Okay, you apologized," I said. "Now what?" "I want to try to explain why I did it," she said, her voice trembling. "I know why you did it," I responded. "You wanted money and you wanted out. Brenda convinced you that I was holding you back from some better life." "It was more complicated than that," she insisted, attempting to justify her actions. "No, it wasn't," I countered firmly. "You made choices, Megan. Bad choices. And when those choices had consequences, you tried to make me pay for them." Tears welled up in her eyes, the kind of desperate, raw tears that come when you realize you've lost everything that truly matters. "I know I hurt you," she sobbed. "I know I can never make it right, but I want you to know that I did love you once. What we had was real, even if I threw it away." "Maybe it was real once," I conceded. "But it wasn't real when you were planning to take everything I'd worked for. It wasn't real when you were lying in court trying to make me look like a monster." "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know. And I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't give me back 13 years of my life, Megan," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Sorry doesn't give me back the trust I had in people. Sorry is just a word." She wiped her eyes and nodded, understanding the weight of her actions. "You're right," she agreed. I wanted you to know that I realize what I lost." "What I threw away." "What you threw away," I said, "was the chance to be happy with what you had instead of always wanting something more. I know that now." "Good for you," I replied, my tone neutral. "But knowing it now doesn't help either of us." She stood there for a moment longer, seemingly hoping for a glimmer of understanding or forgiveness, but I had nothing left to offer her. "Goodbye, JD," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of regret and resignation. "Goodbye, Megan," I responded, my gaze unwavering. I watched her drive away, then returned to my welding. The blue flame danced and sparked, fusing two pieces of metal into something stronger than either piece had been alone. It's a peculiar thing about welding. If you're unaware of where the sparks will fly, you'll inevitably get burned. Some people never learn that lesson. Others learn it too late to make amends. But sometimes, with careful planning and patience, and a willingness to commit to the difficult work, you can take something broken and make it whole again. Not the same as before, but stronger, better. I completed the welding job as the sun set over Millfield, Ohio. Another day's work finished. Another small victory in the ongoing battle to forge something meaningful from the raw materials life provides. It wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was the life I had earned, and that was sufficient.